Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks, the podcast crafted to enlighten individuals and businesses on the path to becoming more sustainable and socially responsible. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, where we support businesses through consulting and training. Today, I'm delighted to be in conversation with Hephzi Pemberton, founder of Honordex, previous leader of the Quality Group and author of Amazon bestseller, The Diversity Playbook. With a focus on tech, startups and leadership, Hephzi has also been recognised through nominations like Social Impact CEO and CEO of the Year, Most Influential Woman in Tech, and many more. So when I came across people as inspirational as that, of course I want to hear more about them and their mission to make the planet a better place for all. Hephzi, how good to have you here. I'm looking forward to this conversation so much. How are you?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm very well.
Good. Well, let's get right into it. And why don't you start by telling us a bit more about you and your background?
Yeah, so, well, my journey into social impact and sustainability comes from unusual backgrounds, starting in investment banking. I worked at Lehman Brothers as an analyst only for just over a year. I left just before the bank went bankrupt and moved into working in executive search, headhunting, people, recruitment, and very quickly set up my first business at the age of 24. And I've never looked back. I've been business building and investing in businesses for 15 years now. And I've just absolutely loved that process of creating and building teams and partnering with clients and trying to bring impact, positive impact, to society and the business world through those ventures and through the ventures that I've also invested in. So I've been angel investing since the age of 26. And yeah, I've always believed that the business world has a huge capacity and potential for positive impact, especially when we see businesses, as big as Google, Apple, Meta, that arguably have more power, more capital, more influence than nation states at this point. And so I'm really passionate about being part of that movement for positive impact within the business world. And in any way that I can affect that, whether that's through the businesses that I build, through the ones I invest in, through the ones I advise, then I want to do that. That's what drives me.
That's great. Maybe tell us a little bit about the story behind founding Honordex and what drove you to create a platform that's focused on ranking companies on social impact and sustainability, and a bit more about Honordex.
Yes, well, so Honordex is a platform that is about building transparency, trust, and fairness within the investment and corporate landscape. And I developed that with the academic team at Quality Group, which is the consultancy. The third business I built is a consultancy firm focused on culture, inclusion, and diversity, because I could really see the need for greater and higher quality data around social sustainability, the social and the governance. That's sort of the S and the G within the ESG. That's the area that I've really built up my expertise, built up my focus and work around. And I was going into meeting after meeting with senior leaders and partners saying, yes, this is all very well and good, but it's not really that quantifiable. We can't really sort of measure it and we can't benchmark ourselves. And I could fundamentally disagree with that, both on the basis of the academic research, but also on the basis of the data that we could see on them and we could find and that we could benchmark them. So we started to pull that together into a framework that we would then present to them. And this was the slide that we would spend so much time on within the meetings. They really hadn't taken that perspective before, which fundamentally is the perspective of all minoritized groups, right? If you're someone, and it can be from any group, okay, but I'll just take the gender lens for now. So if you're, a mum of two going to interview for a company You do want to know what their childcare policy is. You do want to know what their flexible working policy is. You do want to get a sense of, is this a culture where I'm going to be able to build a successful career and also be the parent that I want to be? You want to know this information, and you will be assessing the culture and the work environment through multiple data sources that you'll be accessing, whether that's information online that you can find, information that gets shared during interviews, speaking to other people that have worked there, finding references. And so it's pulling all that data together and showing the employer, the corporate, what they actually look like to these minoritized groups. Do you look like somewhere where people would want to work? Do you look like somewhere where a founder would actually want to take investment capital from? Do you look like a company that a supplier would actually want to partner with? And it was helping them see themselves in a different way, understanding that data set. And Honordex to date has 42 different metrics that we're measuring around leadership, culture, data, strategy, inclusion, diversity, equity, all of these things that we pull together to assign a company a score and then place them with a benchmark within a benchmark of their peers. And on top of that, we don't just sort of leave them with the data, because the data is, the data is a tool, right? The data is a tool for change. What we then have is a recommendation plan. So how do you actually improve on the areas where you are lagging behind or where you have some gaps? Let us help you to do that. Let us help pull some case studies and examples and best practices and toolkits from other companies that have done this well, because a lot of this isn't actually sort of new or rocket science, but it does take concerted effort, time, resource, some level of capital, but actually not that much to get outsized returns, I would argue.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when people are applying for a job and they're sitting in an interview, they might not want to disclose those their personal situation in case that they might feel that it would put the interviewer off. So
Yes.
being able to go and look at this information beforehand,
Yes.
then they can see what the morals and the social value of the company is before them. So it's going to attract more people to those companies, and there's a real fight to attract the best and offer that flexibility, because people today, they just want a different way of working, don't they?
It's a much healthier way of working.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a more balanced way of working, and it's actually what we need. Yes, absolutely. It's about shifting the cognitive burden off of the minoritized individual, or any individuals actually. It's not just any individual, and the responsibility belonging with the organization for transparency and disclosure and accountability around these aspects of workplace culture, social value, and responsibility.
Yeah. Do you think that has changed then, particularly over the last 4 years? I think when we went into COVID and coming out of that, and the work-life balance, I think, has changed quite a lot, and the way that people want to work has really changed. Are you seeing that through the results in these figures?
In Honordex. So what we're seeing with the just over 500 companies that we're measuring currently, mainly across the financial sector, is that there has been year-on-year progress since we started measuring in 2020, but the progress has stalled somewhat. So there was much sharper progress from 2021 to 2022. As you would imagine, coming out of COVID and also off the back of Black Lives Matter and that whole global awareness raising movement of social responsibility and fairness. So it's definitely slowing. And I think we can see that in other data sets as well out there, whether it's around levels of representation within C-suite positions. Yes, the number of women in Fortune 500 C-suite roles has decreased for the first time in 10 years. We're seeing, investment capital dropping in more underrepresented founder groups. We're seeing higher number of women and ethnic minority individuals leaving tech roles. So I think we're really seeing some, I'd say, quite disturbing numbers. I think it's a wake-up call that we don't want to be stalling. Stalling basically means we're going to start going backwards. And these are hard fought, hard worked for liberties, fundamentally.
Yeah, and what we know is that by creating diversity in organisations, it empowers the organisations even further and makes it better for business, better environment, better for the employees. So,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work to be done. Luckily, there are people out there like you, and we can have this conversation and try to create change.
Yeah, and there's also, look, there's a lot of companies that are doing really well. So I don't want to take away
No.
from that, because I think actually we want even more focus on those role models and those success stories at a time like this. So it's really important to sort of also focus on the positive, and we can see some excellent work happening in organizations that are really focused on topics around, pay and promotion equity, or really investing into their culture and how people are able to sort of communicate and really thrive, seek new opportunities. So there is great work happening. It's almost at an industry-wide, nationwide sort of level that I think more attention needs to be paid to it. And I think there's too much sort of complacency that's kicked in as well. But we've made the progress. It's fine. It's like, these are relationships, right? Relationships need constant investment. They need attention. They're active, live beings, and that's the same for workplace culture. You can't just imagine that you've put in place like the parental leave policy and then it's going to be utilized effectively. It needs reviewing, it needs updating, it needs, acclimatizing within the culture. There's so much constant nurturing and attention that this work needs. It's not a one and done ever. And I think that's also something that probably we need to acknowledge a little bit more.
Yeah, it's getting people engaged, really, isn't it? Because it's fine putting a policy up or changing a policy, but then you've got to bring everyone, not bring them on board because it's all policies for good, but share it and constantly speak about it and praise it. And yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that's happening, I think, in terms of the trend of why we're stalling is a reaction to the economic climate. So as we have more strained economic times, as we have rising cost of living, we have higher inflation, companies are under pressure, people are not making as much money, corporations and individuals. This tends to lead to more sort of retrenched status quo behaviors. People become quite scared, they're fearful, they're not willing to take risks, they're not willing necessarily to do new things or try different things. And that, I think, is also affecting this area of social responsibility, as we are also seeing in the environmental domain. And it allows the polarized opposite views to have a little bit more airtime and get more attention in terms of, well, it hasn't really worked. Why were we doing this anyway?
But I mean, it does work, and seeing that there are not new, but that now that a lot of companies are prioritizing ESG and saying to their supply chain that if you don't have a social value policy, if you don't have an environmental policy, then we're not going to be able to work with you. So I think that's great to see that certain organizations are pushing that and demanding it of their supply chain, which then drives the change.
Yes, and the reason why that's so effective is because it has money linked to it. So there's a flow of funds that links to the positive behavior change. And this is what we really need to see more of around the social impact space. So I'm very, very supportive of quotas, targets, goals, whatever you want to call it, just being really specific about where you want to get to and why, with an understanding that it takes time, with an understanding that it will need iterating and reviewing, but really getting quite prescriptive about it, and also assigning some value, some monetary financial value to it. So whether that's around incentives and bonuses within organizations, or around pools of capital that are allocated, or around, on the supply chain, or, how you're doing your RFPs or PSLs, anything that you can actually link to the core fundamentals, financial fundamentals of a business, is going to make it more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about Equality Group and some of the work that you've done there. Can you elaborate a bit on the effective strategies that you implemented or witnessed for achieving diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and share some of that with?
Yes, I think a lot of the work of Equality Group very much starts with understanding and evaluating where an organisation is at currently in their journey, and that involves both some quantitative data gathering but also qualitative data, so qualitative interviews, some focus groups, understanding what is happening currently within an organisation and where do they want to get to, so some vision setting, and then building out a strategy that's informed by that data that's come from that evaluation process, and helping the company to build out a strategy that is really led from the top. So it needs leadership buy-in, and it needs to have senior stakeholders around it, ideally across multiple line functions. The most effective strategic work we've been able to implement is where you do have, C-suite and heads of a few departments that are really able to roll this out, really embed it into their behaviors as leaders, so they're leading by example, but also be able to give the impetus to change some of the systems or processes that might need redesigning or adapting to make them more inclusive. A lot of it can end up revolving around recruitment and retention, so all those processes around people's development and people's journey within an organization, but it can also be around actually the products and the services that the business is providing and how those might evolve and adapt to attract new markets or new customers or have more innovative design processes within them. So there's a real variety of directions that the work can take, but it very much starts with where the organization's at, really understanding the data around the social responsibility, the inclusion, the diversity, the leadership, and then taking it forward from there. I would say where the work ends up stopping is if we don't get leadership buy-in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because often people think, right, let's go to HR or the head of people, but it takes in so much more of the company culture to make that happen. You can't just pick one department and they're going to deal with that. You need the buy-in from everyone all the way around, don't you?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, HR and talent and people are really at the heart of this, but they shouldn't be alone on it. It's not an add-on, it's part of actually the company's strategy. When it's done effectively, it's part of the core company strategy and values. And then you really see the impact and the change, and it becomes, like one client said, it's the water that we swim in now. This is just part of what we do. It's our DNA, and everyone knows about it, and everyone understands and believes in it, and are proud of what we've managed to achieve and build up as our culture.
Yeah. Beautiful poster behind of your book, The Diversity Playbook. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and some of the key takeaways from your book that you can share that business leaders can learn from?
Yes, so the Diversity Playbook really came out of the work at Equality Group, and having built that up over 5 years, the point that I wrote it, it was about condensing and distilling a lot of the strategic consulting work that we'd done with clients, but with an awareness that there were many other organizations, maybe not-for-profits, charities, smaller businesses that we wouldn't be able to work with because of where our focus is and our pricing structure and things like that. But I wanted to share that information because there's so many brilliant principles and excellent social science research aligned with the business case studies that I was like, anyone could actually apply this and benefit from it. And I think every organization can benefit from having more inclusion and diversity and innovation within them. So that's why I wrote the book as a sort of very, I called it a playbook. It's a very practical guide. It brings the best of the academic research with business best practice, with interactive exercises at the end of every chapter, so that leaders can apply it to themselves and their organization very quickly and take some learnings away by the time they've finished the book.
Good. Hope everyone gets it. We'll have to put a link to it. As an advisor and investor in startup companies, what role, and often these companies, they're quite small, but it's a great place for them to start with this meaning. What role do you believe that diversity plays in the success of these ventures. Are there some examples or even success stories that you can share?
Yeah, in terms of some of the clients, I mean, success stories would often center around actually winning new business, winning deals because of the work that they've done. So one of our clients, a very large, multi-billion pounds private equity firm, said they started really doing this work in earnest about 3 years ago, and have made really great progress in terms of their Honordex rankings, and obviously have done a lot of work internally to work on behavior and communication, policies, procedures. About a year ago, one of the lead investors there told me that they had recently won a very, very competitive software deal because of the diversity of their investment team. And they were told, once they actually sort of signed the final paperwork, it's like, we wanted you, like you weren't actually necessarily going to give us the highest price. I mean, it was competitive, but we wanted you, we wanted to partner with you. This is what the management team told them. We wanted to partner with you because of who you were, what you represented, and how you were thinking. And that came out of the diversity of the investment team that they'd really been investing in and thinking about. And they'd really worked on their investment process as well. So it was much more collaborative. It really involved the whole team. It wasn't just one quite arrogant senior partner coming in, telling them everyone else how it would be. And they were like, that matches with our culture, that matches with our ethos. And yeah, that's why you won out. They were like, this is amazing. This is exactly why we've invested in this. This isn't just, okay, we've managed to recruit a few more women into junior roles. This is like, we are genuinely beating our competition now.
Yeah, that's great. And actually that authenticity coming through, and I guess a lot of people that are going into investment are worried that, they're going into meetings and not playing the part that they think that the investors want to see, and really they just want to see the true authentic you and what you can bring, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes I think it's a bit mixed bag, the experience that founders have with investors. But yes, at its best, that is what should be happening.
Is it not? Is that not?
No.
I've never been in front of investors. I've never raised funds. What is it like? What does it look like then? Is it not, look, go in and be yourself and do, like, how does it work then?
There's a huge amount of bias in those industries and in the way that they operate, and that's the experience of a lot of underrepresented founders. And I strongly believe, and I think the research is playing out on this. If you look at, say, the big UN report on what's actually holding gender equality back, is that 9 out of 10 people have some form of gender bias. Now, that is really alive and well within the investment industry, which is what we've seen from the sifted research that came out recently, saying that over 50% of female founders had experienced some sort of bias in an investment meeting. That will be even higher for ethnic minorities. It's quite tough out there. Yeah, there's a lot of change that still needs to happen.
And how can, I mean, then obviously that change, I would say, has to come from putting those minorities or diversities in the room that are
into the investment roles
in the investment. Otherwise, those biases aren't ever going to change.
Yes, but that's not to say that a lot of women have biases against women. Yeah, so it's more systemic as an issue than it is just individuals. And I think that's really important for us to understand, that these biases are just the received wisdom that we've all sort of grown up with. I mean, we all have them. It's the culture and society that we've grown up with that has sort of fed us these messages that, if women are direct and confident, then they can be perceived as sort of aggressive and confrontational. Whereas if a man displays the same behavior, then he is like a leader and he, is assertive and gives you confidence. So, that crosses all genders. And there's similar problems that happen in other areas of demographic diversity too. So I think it's really understanding how these play out within the processes of business. And so in the investment process, the way to combat these sort of biases is, of course, to have more diversity around the investment table. That is one. But you also need to have fairer practices around assessment and evaluation so that it can't just sit with one individual's decision-making power. It has to have more of the wisdom of the crowd about it, and it needs to have more objective criteria that are shared, that are transparent, that people understand what they're being evaluated, when and why, can be held accountable for that. That can be scrutinized. Some level of blind screening would be very, very helpful as well to try and reduce the amount that bias can come in and affect, you know, the person wants to see at the moment what's happening in the VC space is that everyone just wants to fund founders that have come out of the big tech firms. But historically, these are not where the unicorn founders come from. So it's retrenching to sort of tried and tested sort of safety, zones of safety. And then these zones of safety are often where our biases are most alive and well because they don't get scrutinized.
Yeah. I guess I've probably spent too much time watching Dragon's Den and seeing the personal stories that align with the dragons when they want to support people that they really believe in because they're passionate about what they do. And I guess it's not like
Dragon's
that.
Den, no, well, I love Dragon's Den too, but that is, I'd say, the minority of experiences of, certainly if you get into the venture world. It's different with angel investing. I think angels can be a lot more like the dragons on Dragon's Den.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about holding ourselves accountable, which is crucial for driving meaningful change in D&I initiatives. How do you recommend individuals and organisations approach accountability in a constructive and productive manner?
Oh, that is such a big question and a tough question because it somewhat, you know, situation dependent advice. So you know, and there'll be different perspectives to that, which is both the relational, the emotional, but also the legal perspective. So let me just maybe address it from one situation, which would just be more the relational and how do you hold, and one that I've been thinking about recently because there's been quite a lot of stories that are being shared online of people experiencing racism and sexism within business interactions, which I do think it's on the rise. That's definitely been my impression. And now with more of these stories coming out, I think that's something that it's worth being really aware of, and trying to be, for each of us to try and be active allies when we witness these sort of discriminatory views or discriminatory comments being said. So I'll give a practical example. A friend of mine who's a Black CEO, and he's very talented, but he was told by an investor that the reason Black founders get such little funding is because people don't trust them with money. And he asked why was that? And this investor said, well, it's because of all the cases of fraud. And this man just sort of, you know, my friend, just let it go. You know, he just walked away. He didn't have the conversation, he didn't have the fight. He's exhausted. He's completely exhausted. And I think there is, you know, we've got to have a lot of space for exhaustion at the moment because it is exhausting. It's a real fight. And so that is a legitimate response. You don't want to have to take on the fight of educating them, raising their awareness. You know, like, why should you always do that work? That's not fair. So there's that. I mean, of course, he could have responded with like, why do you think all Black people are fraudsters? What about Sam Bankman-Fried, who defrauded millions of billions with the biggest cryptocurrency scandal? Do you think all those investors no longer invest in white Princeton educated men? No, of course not. So why do you have these viewpoints? So that there's the confrontational, like educational engagement. You can do that. I think that it's worth making sure you've got the energy for it, that you've got the knowledge to do it. But it's not actually your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to have to do that every time. I think it's great to share the stories. I think sharing the stories with your community and getting support and getting encouragement and maybe even getting some other ideas of like how you might go and respond is really, really important. I think we need community support and collective action to address these levels of systemic bias that exist.
I've got to say, I'm absolutely horrified and shocked to hear that story. And that
this is, Sam, this is one of 4 stories that I've heard this week from my network. Now, I know that I do this work all day, every day. So I'm going to hear more stories, but these are really senior people, really experienced leaders who are experiencing this in very professional business environments and sometimes in quite public environments. And they are going unchecked, a lot more unchecked than they were 3 years ago.
But should we then be calling that out? I mean, I'm very outspoken on LinkedIn. I'd say what's on my mind. I'm, I don't have anyone to stop me from doing that. And it might have lost me business, so be it. I want to stay authentic to my morals and my beliefs, but shouldn't we be calling those situations out in those companies and saying, look, this happened. Are you aware that this happened? Are you aware that this bias is going on in your company? You seriously need some urgent diversity training. And like, I'm just so shocked and horrified to hear that, and to say that you've had 4 stories this week already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be running a campaign in Pride around this, because I feel that there are far too many stories building up once again, which are going unaddressed, and I want to draw attention to it, and I want to help empower the community to address these situations collectively, make us all a little bit more equipped to hold people to account and to speak truth to power and to change the system. So I feel very passionately about it as well. And but I'm not shocked any longer. I'm more spurred on.
Yeah.
I'm fired up. I'm not shocked. I'm fired up for change.
Well, good. And luckily there are people like you that can stand up and speak out, and that you can help with the change that is needed. And I'll back you. I'm happy to support you and shout out about it and call people out when needed. So you've got my support in that too.
People are very scared to call people out. For a few different reasons, because they are worried about, with the stage that their business is at, or things that they need to get done, that they don't want to risk the backlash. The backlash is very, very real, very real. So I do understand the need for some level of anonymity, but at least I want the stories shared and the support given, and no one to feel that they're alone in having to deal with this level of discrimination in 2024, which is really unacceptable.
I think you don't have to, it's not even always about mentioning names, but sharing the fact that this is happening, and is happening so much, and making more people aware of it. And otherwise we're just sweeping it under the carpet and saying it doesn't happen, and it's
exactly. And that's really not okay. That's really not okay. That's when we go backwards. Yes, precisely. And also I think there's a role for a little bit more equipping and educating in terms of, so that was said, these are the options for how you respond, but which, by the way, are all pretty valid, apart from punching someone in the face, although you might quite rightly want to do that. Here are all like a range of valid responses. I'm sure there are more that other people have ideas for, and sort of share that together, and then equip those that might not have thought through those different options, especially to show allyship, that in situations where they hear any discrimination happening or being voiced, they can step in and question, you know, curious questioning. Why do you think that? Where does that belief come from? And getting into it, because that's how you then shine more light on it and help people realize that this isn't really, you know, assume good intent. This isn't really what they think. They're just repeating stuff that they've heard or that they've grown up with, or that is the just received wisdom. And then you can show them that no, not all black people are fraudsters. Lots of white people are fraudsters. The color of your skin does not determine whether you're a fraudster or not.
Yeah, I think if that was me in the same situation, first of all, I would probably have just walked out, because I wouldn't want to be in any kind of partnership with anyone that had those kind of biases.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if I had something of so much value, a product or business of so much value, I certainly wouldn't want people like that anywhere near it.
Yeah.
And then I'd go and share the story of exactly what happened with all of my community, and as far wide as I could make it reach, because yeah, as I say, I'm really shocked. But I guess it, you know, achieving equality and balance in the workplace, it requires addressing these systemic barriers and biases. Have you found any actionable strategies that in promoting gender equality and creating a more balanced workforce?
I mean, there are so many strategies. There are so many good strategies. There is not, although many clients always are asking what is the most effective. And you can say, well, the most effective will be what is based on your current situation, what your data says, what the actual strategy for the organization is, and then aligning the strategy for inclusion and diversity alongside that. Too often people are looking for short-term fixes. It's not a short-term fix area. It's a long-term journey of development and progress. So there's a ton of different strategies. I do write about that in the diversity playbook extensively, and I've written lots and lots of articles about all the different types of strategies, and there will be new strategies. We will keep coming up with new strategies because we still have so much to learn in this area of inclusion, diversity and innovation. There is so much more still to do. Let me think of one, like really practically one strategy that I've seen used recently that I think is really effective. It would probably be something around capital allocation, because this is something I'm really, really obsessed with, which is like, who's actually getting the money? Who's getting the money to grow their businesses at the moment, which is really constrained, and the numbers have sort of been going backwards. But what I really like to see is dedicated pools of capital for groups of underrepresented founders. So I was really pleased to see Innovate UK bring out a Women in Innovation award that they released yesterday. You know, that award, which they started bringing in 2016, is in response to very low levels of female founder applications to their grant process. So it was something like 16% of applications. So it was very low, and they really wanted to increase it. So they did dedicated awards for women-led businesses, and that's had real success. They've had 70% increase in applications since introducing that, and they've raised huge amounts of awareness, and they've got amazing innovations coming through the pipeline. That's the sort of practical strategy with money attached that actually moves the numbers. So I like seeing things like that. There's a couple of other funds that have done similar things, like Chinovik. They brought in a dedicated part of their strategy, dedicated pool for female-led companies. They will only follow on investments if they see that all of their portfolio companies, not just the women-led ones, all of their portfolio companies are required to have a clear diversity, equity and inclusion strategy, with numbers and data attached in the same way that they've done as a fund. So again, data-driven, thoughtful, aligned with strategy, money attached. Yeah. You know, when you've got that combination, it's powerful, and you start to see things actually shift.
Yeah, it really does. We actually spoke earlier about leadership and how that plays a commitment to driving lasting change in D&I and organisations. is there a way that leaders can demonstrate a genuine commitment to these initiatives beyond the surface level? We're bringing more women on our board, or you know, the gender pay gap. I think it goes way deeper than that.
Yeah. So that is the inner work that leaders need to do. That is inner work of really understanding what does diversity actually mean? Do I understand what diversity means? Does it have a meaning to me? Have I ever experienced exclusion? What did that feel like? What did I learn from that? How would I like to translate that into the company culture? It is sort of coaching level work that we often do at Equality Group with the leadership team, so that they can really build a genuine understanding and empathy around this topic, which is then palpable to the rest of the organization. Because no one is stupid. Like, we understand if someone is just saying words but they don't really mean it, and then we believe it when there's actually some genuine, when there's a real person behind those words, when they've actually had they don't have to have the same lived experience, but they have to have empathy for the lived experience because they've got some understanding around it and they've spent some time really thinking about it and they are committed. And that is a big difference. And obviously there's a spectrum and everyone's sort of sitting somewhere on the spectrum, but I think we can all tell when we're working with or for leaders that are more on the positive end of the spectrum. We can just see through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the equivalent word for greenwashing in the environmental space, isn't it?
Yeah, diversity washing, exactly. And there's
it's called what? Diversity washing.
Diversity washing.
I've not heard that word before, but great.
Yeah.
So you have such a passion for driving positive social change. How do you balance it out with your various roles and responsibilities, from founding and leading companies, serving on boards, writing books? How do you balance it all out? For anyone else that's
I honestly think it's like my life training. Like, I was the eldest of 5 children in a very busy house, both working parents. One was an academic, one was a priest. There were constantly parish meetings happening in the house, so people in and out. It's just I feel like I've always grown up in quite a busy, active, but a very positive environment with lots of different initiatives, very community focused. And I've carried that on all the way through my life in different forms. At university, people were like, when do you actually like sleep? When do you write your essays? Because you're running like 5 organizations and you're doing 3 sports and you're directing a play, and like, what are you, like, how are you getting this degree? Which I also had to ask myself sometimes, but I honestly just think that is slightly the way I'm built. So I prioritize the things that I believe really have value, like what is core part of the purpose for me, and what can I bring my skill set to, who are the people that I really want to partner with, how can we make it sustainable and profitable, and all of those things sort of have to align in a complicated Venn diagram, and then I'm in. And it tends to be that there's a few things that align with that at the same time.
Yeah. I think it just goes to show you're obviously really passionate about what you do and you live and breathe it, so it probably melds into your work, melds into your life and everything that you live. Yeah, I get that.
Completely. I've taken my sons and my dog along to business meetings when needed. I don't want to overexpose them because they don't have that much fun, but yeah, no, things really do merge, but in a beautiful way, in a wonderful way. And I think it's about integration. So much of our having a fulfilled and happy life is about integrating the things that matter to you. And my work really matters to me, but my family and my health really matter to me. So I want them all to sort of sit alongside one another in harmony as much as possible. Now, this is making it sound like I have an ideal life, and I really don't. And some days are better than others, and some weeks are better than others. But the aim is for that. That's directionally where I'm going.
Okay, so do you have any advice then for aspiring female leaders that are looking to make an impact you've obviously worked in very traditionally male dominated industries? What advice would you give?
oh my God, just go for it. We just need more female leaders. We need more female founders. We need more Black leaders. We need more Black founders. We need more of what I call the social majority in our leadership positions and positions of power. We really, really do. We've got to diversify who's running this world and running our institutions. Otherwise, we're going to keep heading in the direction that we're going in. And I don't think it's a very good direction. And I don't think it's serving most of us or serving humanity or the next generation. So I really strongly encourage people that feel that they have a call to leadership or business building to go for it and to find your tribe, find people that can support you and believe in you, have very healthy boundaries, because that is the only way to do this long term. It's an endurance race, building businesses and investing in businesses. So you really need to look after yourself and be around people that will also look after you and support you and believe in you. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many more advice, but my first one would be go for it. Yes, more please.
I love that. I absolutely love that. In this world, something that I often struggle with in the sustainability side is, how do you stay inspired and motivated? What keeps you so optimistic about the future of diversity and inclusion and social impact, when certainly in the beginning you was telling us that the figures are going down?
Yeah, we're having a real blip at the moment. I hope it doesn't last too long. But that's the good thing about having a long-term perspective, which I do. I have a really long-term perspective, you know, beyond even my lifetime. So I think about the legacy. What am I leaving behind for my children and, you know, children's children? So having that long-term perspective helps you to get some sense of actually what's happening short term isn't the biggest priority. There's a larger plan and a longer plan at work, and staying focused on that. And I mean, I think really good routines and rituals. I have a very strong spiritual life. I have very set wellness routines, I suppose you could call it, you know, whether it's walking outside, being in the garden, bathing. I mean, I'm constantly taking baths, or, you know, doing face masks. I mean, a lot of like self-care. Yeah. It's really, really important, because then you can't be sort of then destabilized by the negativity or the difficulties or the challenges as much, because there's this core sense of self and purpose and love and care that you can then extend outwards as well, because you've nurtured it in you first.
Gosh, you're so inspirational. You've made me smile all the way through this, even though we've been talking about a really difficult topic. And thank you for all of the work that you do. I fully support you and will follow you and shout about you and share your stories and some of the stories that you've shared here. I can't wait to put this out. Thank you so much for your time. I could have spoken to you for hours longer, but you know, I really, really appreciate it.